Yeah. I mean, they're ramping up on this domestic terrorism thing. Like, what this is like, it's manufacturing consent 101, right? It's what they do to try to get us into war with all these other countries, try to manufacture our consent, like the public's consent to get into all these wars. Oh, Saddam Hussein is a dictator. Muammar Gaddafi is a dictator. Oh, the kids were taken out of the incubators. It's par for the course in history. And they're doing that here. They're exaggerating what happened. They're like, it's domestic terror. Like AOC is like making herself out to be like a victim. Like she just like escaped, like I don't know, drone strikes. Like they're going to try, and then the Cory Bush's legislation, which was weirdly written like the day before, like on January 5th. I think they had it prepared, because also look at Joe Biden's transition team and the people who are going to be in his administration all have ties to big tech and intelligence. There would be no big tech if there was no CIA, or like they funded that. And so they're ramping up for censorship. They're already targeting the lefty channels. They're just using Donald Trump as the scapegoat and try to use him as the boogeyman to try to manufacture people on the left's consent. What are your guys' takes on that?
I think that I think that even if you agree, which I do, that I mean, I'm of the belief that maybe impeaching Trump during his last few days in office, I don't know if that's like the best way to use your time when we're in the middle of a pandemic. But if you're actually reading the 14th Amendment, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it says that you can impeach someone if they took an oath to office and they either participated in or aided and abetted insurrectionists. Donald Trump did that. There's no getting around that. Donald Trump did that. If you want to say that maybe now's not the right time to push for an impeachment trial, that's fine. Whatever. You're subject to your own opinion. But he did do that. Now, what the scary thing is that now the incoming Biden administration is saying that, like what you just said, they're going to be passing a domestic terror law. They already have like foreign terror laws. Like if anyone is a foreign actor who's committing acts of violence against civilian populations for political reasons, that they're going to get drawn up on charges of terrorism. In the United States, we already have plenty of laws against people attacking civilians. In fact, I don't think there's any terrorist act domestically that could be carried out that wouldn't be met with swift action and plenty of charges that we already have on the books relating to laws that have been enshrined into this country's constitution since our inception. It's like you can't just kill someone or attack someone and expect there to not be consequences. So I don't really understand the need to push for a domestic terrorism law other than what is going to happen, right? You have all these corporate actors who are within the Biden administration. You have all the same neocons who are friends with Biden that are going to have their say in this. You have all the same intelligence operatives who are going to have their say in this bill and this policy, and they're going to pass it. Make like no mistake about it. They will pass this law probably within the first 100 days, and it's going to be a massive crackdown on free speech. There's already lefty accounts that are being censored. Red Scare Pod hasn't tweeted in over a year, yet their Twitter account just got taken down. Chapo Trap House, their subreddit got taken down like a year ago. Richard Medhurst got his account demonetized because he was talking about lefty things. So it's already happening. And if you know your history, you know that the only people that they've really ever gone after as domestic terrorists, there's some right-wing extremists that they've gone after at the federal level, pen charges against. But most of the time, when you have like a CIA or an FBI-backed like sting operation into activists, it's people who are on the left. It's people like Black Lives Matter organizers. It's people like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X. It's people like those who were protesting at Standing Rock. These are the people who really get hit the hardest by operations like COINTELPRO. Yeah. These are the people that they have consistently throughout history defined as domestic terrorists. So I'm extremely scared about what the Biden administration is going to do, especially considering he's the guy who literally almost single-handedly helped the Bush administration pass the Patriot Act.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'll let you guys riff on this too, but I can't imagine your opinions are too different than mine. This is a massive problem that we are looking down the barrel of right now.
Those of you who are like, impeaching Trump, censoring Trump is a good thing. I get that aspect of it, but here's the thing. You could have banned Trump from Twitter years ago. So why is it now for tweets that, and this might be a very unpopular opinion, but the tweets that Twitter claimed were the cause of him, basically being, removed from Twitter did not incite violence to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the very thing. I think that's the thing, as far as social media in general. I think you could say something and people can interpret it in another way and go do it based on that interpretation. That's anything that I or anyone here would have necessarily sent or the intent. Like, I created that intent, just as far as the insurrection last week. Whether Trump, wanted that insurrection to occur, you can't prove that, But, certainly there were people within that crowd who had the idea, But I think, again, for me, it's the idea of being consistent. If you're going to do this with Trump, you should do this to every politician in office, because there have been plenty of things that politicians have said in regards to drone strikes, in regards to bombing other countries, and and especially if they're on a Democrat, the media doesn't bat an eye. But because it's Trump, he's a big boogeyman. They just want a fall guy. They're going to put the blame on him, and ultimately, that's not going to help his base any, because his base see the bullshit. Yeah. So, as Frank and I live in DC, I'm actually going to Atlanta next week because I'm kind of in fear of what could possibly might pop off. Next week during the inauguration, there's still plenty of insurrectors now walking around the streets in DC right now still. Airbnb basically had to ban anyone taking any housing for the next week or so out of fear for that. So I don't see how this could make this any better than what I feel is going to be a way much worse situation if they just kind of whatever, he's going anyway, let's, whatever, or, making consistent across the board for every politician.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. First of all, last Wednesday was completely preventable. We know how tight things can get in DC from experience. There was one cop for each of us ready to arrest us when we were protesting healthcare. Very harmless healthcare, right? So Wednesday was preventable. They are playing politics now, and I think that's pretty disingenuous. I think it's pretty disgusting what they're doing now. And guess where Joe Biden is having his inauguration in person next week?
Right.
At the Capitol building.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So they can secure the Capitol building when there's something going on.
Right.
Okay. So this is all politics. This is all theater, and I'm not going to debate that with anyone. That's what this is. All right. As far as impeaching Trump, sure, he's had multiple impeachable offenses. I'm sure. You could have got him out for the emoluments clause or whatever, but that would have actually implicated a lot of Democrats. So that didn't happen, right? Because Democrats would actually be guilty as well. Oopsie. So they're playing this game now. Well, yeah, they're playing this game now, and this is what they've chosen to do. I don't know how to explain this to my liberal friends, but impeaching Donald Trump isn't going to make the Nazis go away. It's not going to make Trump go away. It's only going to make those people even worse. So if that's what you're trying to do, I guarantee you the impeachment of Donald Trump is the wrong way to go. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they're going to go to their own corners and get even more mad.
Exactly. We're going to be even more divided. You want to talk about unity? Well, Joe Biden ain't it, all right? Joe Biden's not it.
Ricky, to be fair, Joe Biden did say he wanted to deal with white supremacy. So this is a chance to do it. That's what that means, but he said it. Although, to be fair, I figured it was black people would have to remind him of the implications of white supremacy. And the insurrectionists last week already did our work. So, but this is what Joe Biden said he was going to deal with. So let's see how he.
If Biden wants to deal with white supremacy, he should make a time machine and go back to 1994.
Yeah, stop himself from writing that crime bill. Shout out to Seaman Staines. She said, my hat is on backwards. Yes, it is. What the name? Seaman Staines.
You guys and your names, man.
I know. So I do want to say something about this. It's like the language that they're saying that Trump used to quote unquote incite violence is, he said like something like fight like hell, or like they're gonna fight like hell. That can easily be used against leftist movements when we say, let's fight like hell for Medicare for all. Let's fight like hell for forced to vote. Let's fight like hell to defund the police. Easily be used against us.
Or AOC.
Yeah.
Ruckus.
And then, well, just one more thing. Like, I was in an argument with one of my friends. He was saying, like, what part of, like, it's the president that's inciting violence and he has, like, a lot of influence. Do you not understand? And I said, well, look at Bernie Sanders. What if he became the president? Or him as just like as a campaigner when he was running for president. Let's fight for a revolution. You don't think that's threatening? They're going to use that against him. They can use that against leftist movements so easily. And that's what they're hoping for. They're just using Trump and what happened on January 6th as a gateway to take away our civil liberties. And again, let's remind people, Joe Biden is the author of the Patriot Act, and he bragged about it.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, they did do that with Bernie. Like, the mainstream media smeared him to high heaven, and people are like, we don't want a revolution. We don't need one. Well, so they already have done it. So,
yeah. And
it's like against people that they don't like, who are kind of anti-establishment, that they do that to.
And Chris Matthews, I think it was. He was that old guy on MSNBC, right? If it's not him, I apologize, but it was one of the MSNBC chuds. They came out and compared Bernie Sanders' victory in Iowa and New Hampshire to the Nazi invasion of France, even though he's an old Jewish man. And he said, I think it was Chris Matthews. He got fired after it.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's who it was. He's like, what we saw last night is comparable to when the armed forces of the Nazis invaded France. And I was just like, what?
Did you hear when Chuck Schumer compared it to Pearl Harbor and that it's going to be a date we'll always remember?
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was crazy too.
So Convocat said both sides need to stop framing each other as domestic terrorists and instead understand why people on both sides are pissed. Yeah, we share a common enemy. Like, we need to remind people. There were so many people on my Facebook that were using the same arguments that the conservatives would use against Black Lives Matter protesters. Like, they're like, oh, those people are traitors for going there to the Capitol. They're being violent. They're destroying property. Like, that's what you were defending Black Lives Matters protesters for destroying property. Like, we need to understand that we share a common enemy. It's the elite. Like, we are all oppressed, and they keep us confused. They tell us lies. From the moment we're born, we're told lies. And that's on purpose because they want us to be divided so that the status quo remains as the status quo and they can keep enriching themselves as we remain as fools fighting and they're eating popcorn in their rich mansions.
I'm going to push back on that one a little bit. I think the fact that we had a bunch of, insurrectionists going to the Capitol on a mission that was essentially inspired by lies from people within the Trump campaign and by Trump himself isn't something that should necessarily be tolerated at all. I don't think. What I tweeted out the day it was happening. First of all, I was just so depressed I didn't even want to cover what was happening because I was like, this is just terrible what's happening. Not because of what was happening, right? People all across this country are in pain, they're suffering, and I think we all understand that. There's plenty of people who are suffering, who are being brutalized and harassed due to the system right now. But the thing is, you have to recognize why it was happening. Black Lives Matter protesters out in the street because they're trying to get like equal rights for people who are being systemically oppressed by this brutal system and also just literally murdered in the streets by police. These people were going to the Capitol to protest against election results that have been challenged dozens of times, and virtually every time, with the exception of a few cases in which actual Trump supporters were found to have committed election fraud, there was no election fraud to be found. So I push back on that because I think it's very dangerous to compare what they were doing to what Black Lives Matter supporters and protesters are doing, essentially. And I think their outrage was not justified, is what I'm trying to say. I think Black Lives Matter supporters, their outrage was justified. I think environmental protesters, Standing Rock people, climate change activists, their outrage is justified. I cannot say the same for the insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol.
Let me push back a little bit,
I would push back.
Jackson. We do have a history of election integrity problems in our country. Because our elections are not transparent is the problem to begin with. Like, if we knew for sure that Trump won, like without a doubt, I don't think that would have happened. And there's also a lot of people there for different reasons. Like, there are people like there that were mad about a bunch of other stuff. Like, some people were there because of like the stimulus. From what I hear from people who are on the ground. But yeah, like we do have election problems, and if our elections were transparent enough, I don't think that would have happened. And that's part of what keeps our population divided and confused.
I think Trump's superpower is manipulating the system. That the trouble that's already existed within our current system, for his benefit. And I think, and the commonality, and again, like I've gone into, different arguments with this with people over the last couple of days. Like, you can see a commonality between Black Lives Matter, even with this, is just dissatisfaction within our government and just what it represents and the implications of what our government is doing in light of, in the lives of daily people. Not to say I condone anything that happened, at the insurrection. But also, and those of you who follow me on Twitter know this because I went on a mega rant on this, last week. When I applied for the permit, the police officer that I spoke to basically said to me, that whole area around the Capitol was closed. We can only have about 50 people at our protest. We were basically only able to, stay at the park where we were kind of based on. But, it's DC, you can do a protest if you kind of walk on the sidewalk and keep walking, which we were doing, and yet we were all were being very close to being arrested all 3 days. And they brought how many cops?
Yeah.
They just let those people in.
Like, enough cops for one person, at our protest. And yet, the cops allowed carte blanche to these insurrectionists to basically allow access into the Capitol, without any problem. So I think, though, it's just the idea of this frustration with government overall, and how people feel that they're not being listened to in light of government. And I think that's a commonality, whether you are progressive, liberal, conservative, or somewhere in the middle there, that I think we all have. And that's not an issue. And I think Trump was very good in kind of manipulating that to make people feel like, oh, he understands me. He gets me. He's going to fight for me. And so while I don't condone what happened, I do kind of understand it to a degree.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I understand it too, even though I don't agree with the reasons for why a lot of people were there. Like a lot of people were just like, they were misled. And I personally wouldn't ever give my life for a politician.
Right.
And Convo Couch says, guys, do you understand the process and structure of how our elections are run? Bill Binney and Scott Ritter agree with me. They were bad and deserve a real audit. We didn't get one. Yeah, for more like election integrity issues, like Convo Couch does a great job breaking things down. Again, like I understand the reasons for why they were there. I personally wouldn't have been in there storming the Capitol, but I do wish it was like us in an organized manner protesting for actual policies like forced to vote, like defunding the police, like a whole list of different policies. I wish that we could have organized there, but it appears like they let people in. They were not aggressive against those protesters. They would have been aggressive against us though, and right. They're gonna use that excuse like, oh, these are domestic terrorists, like we need to take more precaution next time. Right. I think that they're gonna ramp it up and be more aggressive on us going forward. What do you guys think?
No, I definitely agree. And I think, but here's the thing though, like, what if forced to vote, like even with our protests, if we had enough planning? You know, like, I'm fairly sure that many of those guys, not all of them, but I'm sure many of them who were at the insurrection would consider coming. Because, I mean, they need healthcare too. You know, I'm sure many of them have issues too. And so I think, again, this kind of goes along to what I'm saying is the stories that we have, you know, just as far as, you know, our issues need to be elevated, you know, to the world of the politician who essentially lives in the DC, and I can't even call it the DC bubble because it's within them, it's just kind of like the capital bubble as far as, you know, not being aware of the true issues that are, you know, surrounding people every single day. And I think, you know, like, and you're right, Frank, I do believe that they're kind of using like, and you see this with politicians all the time, you know, like they're always kind of blaming each other. And for the rest of us, we kind of view it as a team sport. Like, I'm for my team and this other team sucks. I'm for the Republicans and then the Democrats suck. It's always like pointing fingers at one another. And I think this is my frustration with the squad, going back to that, is now they kind of co-opted the language of, oh, it's the Republicans' fault that this doesn't happen. No, what about your own leadership who, AOC, you kind of called out initially and have called out Nancy Pelosi, you know, on the issue, her issues as far as speaker, and you're mute when it comes to calling her out now. So I think it's just the idea of, you know, if we're able to kind of come together to kind of think about like, what are the issues that we all have a stake in, and finding common ground in those things, it would be better for the country, I think, overall. But I think you're right. I think that's a lot of this pointing, you know, politically is on purpose to kind of distract us from, you know, fighting for real issues that I think are more pertinent versus like an impeachment issue that really should not have as much attention as it is. But again, as I said, I fear it's going to, because it's just a perfect distraction from what people need right now.
I agree. It's interesting because I've been finding more common ground with right-wingers than I have with my liberal friends lately, because at the very least, even though we don't agree on messaging at all, at least right-wingers can identify that there's a major, major problem with our government. They may not be able to articulate what they're feeling, and they may do some crazy things like last Wednesday, which was crazy and chaotic. But at least they understand that something is not right. That's why they went with a populist candidate with different rhetoric, even though I don't like the rhetoric, but they know something's wrong. You know, the apolitical, the people that aren't really involved in politics, they know something's wrong. That's why they don't participate, right? The politically homeless don't know where to go because they know something's wrong. The left knows something's wrong. And I can't, the people that are supposed to be my allies, I would think, are my liberal friends, because I live in a very liberal area, and I can't get through to them. They think that I'm a crazy extremist. They think incrementalism is the way to go. And we've seen over and over and over that incrementalism is a failure, especially when things move so fast now. When the military wants a $740 billion budget, they get it like that. And when we're pushing for, universal health care for 75 years, we're still getting nothing.
It's more like, how do we pay for it?
So I feel like we thought we had a disagreement, but we agree on a lot of I agree with a lot of what you guys just said.
Yeah.
I do think there's election integrity issues. I think paper ballots are an incredible way to amend a lot of the election integrity issues that we see, and Tulsi Gabbard's been a huge proponent of that. She's been met with no support from virtually anyone else, which sucks. But I think there's that. I think ranked choice vote. I honestly think that our elections, even if they had paper ballots, are destined for failure and for an inherent lack of democratic representation from the get-go, even if we had paper ballots, because we don't have ranked choice voting in this country. Both parties are controlled by the same people. It's an oligarchy. I don't think any of us disagree on that. The only thing that my frustration is these people, and Colin, I hear you, a lot of it was facilitated by the Capitol Police, who let these protesters in the Capitol open up the barricades and let them in. Also, Trump denied any request for the National Guard to come and protect the Capitol, which I think was only the request was only approved 3 hours in after the insurrection started. And I'm hearing now that Mike Pence may have been the one to approve that request. So there's tons of problems with election integrity. Some of the people at fault here are not just the protesters. It's obviously, I think the police are definitely at fault in a massive way. And I think the Trump administration is also at fault in a massive way. But the thing is, we've had so many challenges in courts about election fraud, which is a different thing from systemic election integrity. And those challenges have all either been thrown out because there was no grounds to hear them, or they've been heard. And when the case was presented, there was nothing to substantiate the claims, right? That's what I see the difference in the argument between election fraud and election integrity. I think you can be fed up with election integrity and the lack thereof in this country, but to go and try and storm the Capitol, and I'm not saying everyone there did that. The Convo Couch was interviewing plenty of people who were just there protesting peacefully, and also shared many of the same concerns that I think we share about this country and about the oligarchy that runs this country. So I think that there's plenty of normal people that were there, but there's no way in hell that I'm ever going to feel any sort of I guess compassion for the people who were in there. The only compassion I feel are for the people who were brutalized and killed thanks to Donald Trump touting these false claims of election fraud. I feel bad for them. I feel bad for the cops who died, because this was Trump going out there and continuing to leverage these false notions about election fraud. And he promoted this and allowed them to essentially go do that. And cops killed innocent protesters, and protesters, literally killed cops. And there's just nothing that can be said, from my point of view, which would, I guess, condone what took place, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I think we can all agree none of us condone what happened. And, just as far as the severity of what happened, I think we all agree that it was basically the perfect storm of chaos. But for me, and I'll say this just kind of personally as a Black man who, not to say I've dealt with white supremacy overtly, given, my, just my upbringing, but I definitely have been educated to kind of be aware of it. And so for me, a couple of people have been like, you should be more surprised. And I'm like, no, because essentially I've been trained and educated to believe that this is part of our history, essentially, as Black people in America, or basically in the West, and for me, it's kind of when it was, not to say I was expecting this to happen, but in a way I was, and given the vitriol, first of all, we haven't we haven't dealt with white supremacy properly, at all, in this country. We've just kind of brushed it under the rug, and just kind of denied. And just even talking with some people over the weekend, people are still basically like, oh, we fought the Civil War and like Black people have more rights now and everything's okay. And I'm just kind of like, really, but, there was a reason why I hated my high school. But I think it's like the idea of, and I think Trump was good in kind of exposing ugly that is America. Like Joe Biden made a comment like, our country is better than this. We are not this. You are this. You've just denied it and avoided that issue, and you have the privilege to do so as a white man, But I think most people, and I think who've been reading the tea leaves, I'm not surprised that happened. It was just a question of when and how it was going to happen. But it doesn't take away the idea for me that what happened, was hate. Like the fact that I basically was trying to run home last week because I was at work, having to try and run home before everything closed down, before curfew was like, that was scary enough. And as I said, I'm planning to be out of town next week because I don't want to be here in case something else happens, and I think that's something we all have to be mindful of, is that this will happen again if we're not careful, and not necessarily in DC. There's going to be I'm sure there's going to be more of these things kind of popping up everywhere from now on. So I think, again, just going to what's saying to Trump, they're only poking the bear as far as, impeachment. So, because I just feel like it's just going to get a whole lot worse, that people are going to feel like, oh, Trump is, they're going against Trump, my hero, my savior, whatever. And we were fortunate that there were not as many lives who were killed, at this insurrection. There will be more if we're not dealing with this properly. So.
Yeah, and I'm worried about Inauguration Day. And also, I've read a couple of reports that in articles written by Whitney Webb recently, and also from other members from The Last American Vagabond, like Ryan Christian and Derek Rose, where they talk about how there's been simulations that have been run by our government like a year and a half or 2 years before the election about chaos that would happen post-election, and about how there's going to be domestic terrorism and how they're going to deal with it via censorship and more surveillance. And also with I don't know if you guys have heard of Event 201, but it was a simulation that was funded and sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Johns Hopkins, Johnson & Johnson. And in that simulation, they were dealing with a coronavirus called H1N1, and they were talking about how they're going to, I'm not saying whether it's the virus is manufactured or not or anything. I'm just saying it's strange how a lot of the stuff that they talked about in that event 201, came to pass a year later. That event took place in October 2019, and they were talking about how they were going to censor people and channels that go against the mainstream media narrative about the virus and who are going against the narrative about the vaccine. How they're going to use sources that people trust, like Wikipedia or AP or Google, to try to gain the trust of the public, and so that they can see the information that they want the people to know. They didn't say the objective information, but the information that they want the public to know. So is there something deeper going on? I can't officially prove anything, but it's something to be very cautious about. And as far as the election integrity stuff, what's his name, Giuliani, and all the Republicans, they were presenting like the worst evidence possible about it. Like they were talking about like the ghost of Hugo Chavez like hacking the election. Like they used really bad evidence there. But yeah. I'd recommend people check out Convo Couch and the evidence that they present. Well, I can't personally say that the election was stolen. Like it's possible that there was election fraud and then Trump still could have lost. Like I don't personally know. And I think that's the problem for a lot of people, is that we don't officially know because our elections are not transparent enough. Are there any final things you guys want to say about everything we talked about, from censorship to forced to vote?
Just one thing. I think, yeah, just more props to you, Jackson, and Franco, just as far as, just speaking truth. And I think, I think we're definitely in, and to be kind of hopeful, because I am very much a pessimistic by nature. Jackson kind of knows this about me by now. But I think what makes me hopeful, and I'm an older millennial, is kind of seeing, now this wave of people who are more critical as far as our world around us and our government, and are willing to do something about it. So that being said, I want to give props to you, Jackson and Franco, I think for your channels as far as what you're trying to do, for us as far as giving us the truth. But I think the extra step is, what practical steps can we do as far as trying to change, our consciousness, essentially. I think, again, like for the last few years, there's just been a lot of talking, and that's fine, but talking without action is meaningless. So yeah. I definitely appreciate that there seems to be now a new wave of media who are not just talkers, but are actually doers. And so I definitely appreciate both of you for what you're doing as far as having people aware of the reality that does exist in government and just in our world overall. But I think are giving people like me who are dying to do something kind of more constructive and productive as far as bringing that, change that we desire to see, that there are people who are willing to take the steps to do that. So just want to thank you guys for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Colin, and Jackson, and Ricky.
Yeah, I'll add one last thing here, and thank you for the kind words. I just commented something in the live chat. If you guys just copy and paste that, if you're looking for like talking points as to why people should be opposed to the domestic terrorism plan that Joe Biden's going to be rolling out, it's very likely that his plan is going to be similar to the one that was introduced in 2019. So that I just linked, copy and pasted. Essentially, you can look it up. That's the ACLU's statement on opposing the threat of the Domestic Terrorism Act. Read it, because it is very powerful, and I think they make a very strong case for something that might, on the surface, especially if you have like, you have like kind of apolitical friends that might not know what Biden is pushing here. It might sound like a okay thing to introduce a law against domestic terrorism, but there's a lot of meat under that title, and there's a bunch of reasons as to why we should be opposed to it. So go check that out if you haven't already. It's a really good explainer, and thank you for having us on your show, and thank you to everyone who tuned in.
Ricky?
I'll just add, stay consistent, people. Stay consistent out there. If you're rooting for the impeachment of Donald Trump, which, fair, you can, look at Joe Biden the same way. Look at Joe Biden the exact same way. 1998, Joe Biden was pushing the WMDs lie. He was the one saying that there were WMDs in Iraq way before George Bush, and people don't know this. But Joe Biden was the guy out there lying, and that lie is what killed millions of people, and it displaced millions of people all over the world. So if you're going to be critical of Donald Trump, and you're allowed to be, you got to be critical with everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Consistent.
Yeah, all the politicians that like, and Richard Medhurst was bringing up this point, and also Jordan of the Yellow Brick Road, shout out to him. They were saying, you be consistent, because what about all these politicians that want to get in all these regime change wars and then tell all these lies and give reasons for why we should go? They're like calling all these leaders that were democratically elected dictators, and they're not taking off. They're not taking off of social media. And what about all the other people that are complicit and allow them to say it, like Bernie Sanders? And sometimes Bernie Sanders gives these talking points too. Why aren't we consistent there? And why aren't we consistent also? Let's go even further, like the media, like the mainstream media that repeats these lies, and then also like the people on YouTube, the media there, like the Young Turks. Like those people that repeat their lies, and then the people that don't criticize them enough, like, oh, we weren't critical enough of those people. Like, shouldn't we be held accountable too? And it's just like, it's hard to say, like, what is actually like inciting violence and all that. Like, but yeah, like Ricky was saying, and like how Richard Medhurst and I think Jackson and Colin were also saying, be consistent about this. Okay, these other politicians are warmongers. They've been warmongers for years, some of them decades, and some of them are walking around free in their freaking mansions, like Madeleine Albright, Henry Kissinger. But yeah, I'm so happy I had to have you guys on here. I'm so happy I met you guys in person. It's awesome also that I got to like give you guys a ride too, and we had like great conversations in there. I love how we got all hyped at one point because we thought that Cory Bush actually withheld her vote, but then later we found out that she probably wasn't there or whatever, and then we were like, oh man, oh well. That it was still awesome meeting you guys, eating with you guys. Like I loved seeing you guys in person. I hope to do that again. I hope to collaborate with you guys some more.
Definitely.
Yeah. Again, congratulations, Jackson, for your channel. Go ahead and subscribe to Jackson Hinkle if you have not yet subscribed to him. It's The Dive with Jackson Hinkle. I think, Colin, you're having a YouTube channel soon too, and Ricky as well.
Not anytime soon, but soon-ish, whatever that means.
Hey man, we need as many truth tellers as we can. And I love you guys, and I love my audience members. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and don't forget to stay informed.